But let's waste no time and dive into it, man. I want to get your all's take before we dive in. Well, let's hit the tweet real quick. And it's pretty straightforward. Daniel Jeremiah, a former NFL scout, he used to scout for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, he's with the NFL Network now. He took over from Mike Mayock, and whether you think Mike Mayock was a good GM or not, the reality is he was the lead NFL draft expert for NFL Network, and he was so good at what he did that it got him a general manager job in the NFL, which is way further along than any of us will ever see, right, when we're breaking down the draft. So Daniel Jeremiah took over for Mike Mayock. And Daniel Jeremiah, if you don't know, he played quarterback at Appy State. I don't think he made it to the NFL, but he went into scouting. He scouted for the Baltimore Ravens. I know, Emilio, you watch his show all the time, as do I, especially during the mowing season. He's a guy who understands the draft process inside and out. Here is what his tweet said, and I want to get your all's take, and then we'll dive into the details. But Daniel Jeremiah just tweeted out last night. He said there are a lot of day two starting cornerbacks in this draft. All right. Now, again, starting cornerback. He's saying day two of the draft, there are several, a lot is the word he used, right? Cornerbacks that are going to start for NFL teams day one. Now, are there a handful of them, maybe one or two that are slot corners? Could be the case. You're talking a little semantics here, right? But the majority of those guys are going to be playing outside. So that would suggest, just with that tweet alone, the Packers at 52, that's day two, they should be able to nab a cornerback that could start right away. Jacob, what do you think about that take, man, based off of what we've seen? Because we've kind of talked about, like, you better get one at 52 or you're really going to miss out, right? Hasn't that been kind of the theme? Same thing with D tackle, but cornerback as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe some recency bias because that's how it's been in years past for sure. I kind of like what he's talking about because just last night I happened to there's a few right around that 52 area that we've already highlighted, guys like Keontae Scott, D'Angelo Pons, Chris Johnson. But then, like you said, or maybe like he's referring, you look even down more. They got guys like 83, Devin Moore. He had an 83 overall. 104, they have Traden Stukes. He was a 90.1 overall grade, fifth out of 908 cornerbacks. You got guys like Will Lee III, Xavier Scott at 109, Malik Muhammad, who I know is high on a lot of guys' scales. He's at 111, and I haven't even gotten past there. We still have talked about guys like Davis and Igbizum.
Oh my God,
Igbinosun. Guys like Thaddeus Dixon, there are quite a few names to be talked about down there. Julian Neal. So, yeah, I'm excited.
It's funny you butchering that pronunciation. There's two that I've got notes for here, okay? Ihanakor was one of the better tackles in the game. And we've been saying Kazoil. Evidently, the pronunciation online that I looked up is Koziol. So I'm sure we'll forget that between now and then, but – Amelia, what do you think about the cornerback class? And I know you've been on the road, you've been traveling, probably haven't been able to dive in as much as you like, but what do you think here? Do you think it'd be worth taking one at 52? And obviously day two means the third round as well, right?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think from, just those couple early mocks, it's like, yeah, if we don't get one early, then we think that we don't have one. But I feel like you can find a little bit of talent late. Like, Jacob was kind of rattling through them there. You got Chandler Rivers too. It seems like they kind of, sort of stack in there a little bit, like 80 to 120-ish, numbers wise, but we'll see. I mean, we're going to need one at some point. I feel like you're going to have to find somebody that you like and sort of, kind of hang your hat on that. But I think that you'll be able to find someone there deeper in the draft, which we're going to need. We're going to need a little bit of help back there. So I'm kind of excited to dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah. Let's see here. Lil Mick Crocodile Dundee says in the chat, Pons or Johnson? That's a great question. If you look at our board here, and what I've done is I've got a screen grab here of our draft board, and it's sorted by cornerback position, and our overall score is on the far right. Okay, low number wins. So when you go down that, if you were to ask me about those two corners, which would we pick? Who do you say, Pons or Johnson? Right.
Yep.
With Pons or Johnson, D'Angelo Pons is our sixth best corner on our board. Okay, he is sitting there with a 40.4 grade. More than worthy of the 52nd pick if he's sitting there on the board. Next would be on that list would be Keith Abney behind him, right? And then you get into Brandon Cease. Well, Chris Johnson is just above D'Angelo Pons. Okay, he's in the 5 spot. And again, there's one placeholder. There's a reason you're seeing the 6. It's actually a 5. His is a 36.1 is the grade we've got on Chris Johnson. Okay, so if Chris Johnson and D'Angelo Pons are on the board when we pick at 52, I think I've got to go with Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson is the bigger cornerback, right? D'Angelo Pons, there's an argument to be made that Chris Johnson played better than Pons last year, although Pons won a national championship and he played great in those big games. But D'Angelo Pons is undersized, right? So if the grade was exactly the same, and these guys, I mean, they're not even in the same tier, right, Emilio? They're just outside different tiers there. So
right. And that the big difference there, Clay, is that Senior Bowl or the Senior Bowl -5 points for Chris Johnson there, because like we talked about, and I think we went over it last year, is like, you carry into it being the national championship team, you might not get that bonus, but do you get a little knock because you were part of that? I'm glad that Chris Johnson, stood out there, but that -5 is a big swing right there for those two.
It is. And when you break everything down, there's only one thing that would suggest, yes, you should take Pons over Chris Johnson. Just one, that he played much more difficult talent, right? The opponent's schedule, right? The opponents on their schedule, I should say, were much more difficult for Indiana than it was San Diego State. Everything else across the board, I mean, Chris Johnson was the second highest graded corner. D'Angelo Pons was the sixth highest graded corner, right? Like you said, come Senior Bowl week, they were both there at Senior Bowl week. Chris Johnson dominated. D'Angelo Pons, not saying he played bad, but he did not play at the level that Chris Johnson did. So if the question, Jacob, is which of these two cornerbacks is more pro ready right now, you will go, well, D'Angelo Pons probably played against more pro level talent, right, than Chris Johnson. However, when it came put up or shut up, Senior Bowl week, Chris Johnson against the best of the best in college football that week, and then putting them in situations where it's one-on-one bump and run situations, right, where you're having to cover the best wide receivers coming out in the draft as well. Chris Johnson dominated. D'Angelo Pons didn't play bad, but he didn't dominate at the level Chris Johnson did. So that, like Emilio pointed out, Jacob, without that 5-point bonus, I can be swayed into taking D'Angelo Pons maybe. But with that 5-point bonus and the size difference and the PFF grades and everything in between here, I'm trying to see here. Like, I mean, even when you look at Dane Brugler's rankings, right? He's got Chris Johnson 38, D'Angelo Pons 40, right? But at the same time, Daniel Jeremiah didn't have either of these cornerbacks in his top 50, which leads credence to his tweet that, day two, you can get a good corner. That I'm sure both of these guys are on his day 2 list. But what do you think about all that, Jacob? If you had to pick one of those two, who are you going with?
Yeah, if I had to pick one of the two, I'm definitely going Chris Johnson. Like you said, the size issues. PFF hasn't always been great with listing the sizes accurately, but they have Chris Johnson at 6 foot 195, like you mentioned there. Mr. D'Angelo Pons, they have him listed at 5'9", 173. Just seems a bit undersized for what the Packers like to do. But that being said, I mean, a guy grading out as a 91.6 second overall versus Pons as the 9th overall. I mean, those are two great, 7th overall, 2 great prospects there. Like you said, the level of talent would be something that would make you obviously sway towards one or the other. But I think that more of what you highlighted is when you actually put the highlight on them, put the spotlight on them, make them go up against really good competition. The Chris Johnson thing just seems too good to be true. I really hope he's still available around that 52 mark. If he's not, then so be it. Like I said, like to your point, PFF does have Chris Johnson at 59. They got Pons at 55, so they do consider him slightly better. But I have to stick with our board and say let's run that card if we get Chris Johnson.
Yeah, and Chris Johnson, Jacob, kind of like Quinyon Mitchell. It's like, all right, yeah, you didn't get to see him play, like, coming out of Toledo last year, didn't get to see him play all that competition, that talent, but you come into the Senior Bowl, you're playing top dog, you're playing best of the best, and you show up. I love to see that. Yep. You're not afraid of the competition, all that.
Jacob, so did you say the PFF big board today has Pons higher than Johnson? Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, 55 to 59. Yep.
So if you'll notice on our board, and this is why I do this, I talk about it every year, and I know there's some that disagree. It's the reason I do it is I want to know how people felt about these prospects when the football stopped being played, right? Before all the buzz. We'll control the buzz of the All-Star Week and the Combine and all that, right? With bonuses we can add in. But at the end of the college football season, PFF Big Board had D'Angelo Pons at 58 and Chris Johnson at 43. Well, now all of a sudden Pons has jumped him on the PFF big board, right? I love that our board is holding true to, again, I waited till the college football season was over, gave it a week and a half, boom, put the numbers in. That way, fresh off of what the tape showed, fresh off of what we seen on the football field, that's how those players were ranked. And I would love to sit down with PFF and go, what made you bump him up? You know what I mean? I would love to be able to ask him that. Like, why did you all of a sudden go from 58 to leapfrogging Chris Johnson when Chris Johnson had a great Senior Bowl? You know what I'm saying? Like it's just, I want to know the answers to those questions, if that makes sense. So, and again, we put the PFF data in for a reason. We like it, you know, and I think our board is held really, really true year in and year out. It's not perfect, but more times than not, we look up and go, damn, boys, we got it right.
Not we at this point, mid-February, Clay, Chris Johnson's already dropped 16 spots on PFS big board, right? So it's how can you take it as true or what was true? Right, exactly.
Yeah. And if the argument was, well, he didn't have a good Senior Bowl and Senior Bowl week of practice, then I would get that. But I think it was Daniel Jeremiah that said he had a great Senior Bowl week. So again, it's that's kind of how I look at that. So those are two that somewhat get highlighted here. Now let's look at our cornerback room before we move on to the next topic. Currently sorted by PFF grades defensively here. Okay, you got Kamal Hadden leading the way at 67.6. It was only 37 snaps. You guys know you got to get to that 100 snap mark before I really kind of take it serious. Like, okay, that's enough that we can truly grade how he played. Although Kamal Hadden, I don't know if he's going to play this year. I'm eager to see what his update is on his injury. I don't think he's currently under contract with the Packers, but I don't know how that injury works as well. They may have to carry him where he might have been like a exclusive rights free agent or something. I don't know. We'd have to look into the details of his contract situation, but wipe him off the board here. Okay. Expect him to not be effective this year because that was a horrible injury. Keyshawn Nixon, 66.7. This is what I was saying. As much as he pissed me off this year, and there was times it was just like, man, stop running your mouth, just play the game. You know, so if you're going to act like a tough guy, make the tackle at the goal line, you know, those type of things. He still did grade out as the best cornerback on our roster to 66.7. Next was Carrington Valentine, 63.1. Nate Hobbs, who was Goody's pick of the litter in free agency, ended up grading out to 61.7. And then you got a Shamar Bartholomew only played 34 snaps at 58.7. Trayvon Diggs, 58.7. But again, that was the majority of all but one game where he played in Dallas. He comes to Green Bay, and I think he graded out in the 80s, I believe, 70s or 80s in that one game, if I remember right. So when you look at the passer rating when targeted to kind of cross-check PFF grades, here's the passer rating when targeted. One game with the Packers, 32 snaps. Trayvon Diggs had a 39.6 passer rating when targeted. It's only one game. And again, not even 100 snaps, so you got to kind of throw it out the window. But he did lead the Packers in passer rating when targeted 39.6, along with Zane Anderson, but again, only 21 snaps. And then you got Xavier McKinney, 40 was his passer rating when targeted. Bartholomew, like I said, only 32 snaps at 60.4. Jalen Simpson, 85.4. There's Kamal Hadden with his 37 snaps, 91.7. So when you look at the passer rating when targeted on Kamal Hadden and you look at the PFF grade, they both check out, right? And so what we're looking for is Keyshawn Nixon. Like, why is he so low on the list? Next would be Evan Williams. And then our first cornerback, our first starting cornerback is our boy Javon Bullard. I don't think people realize the step he took forward. I know 97.1 isn't a great passer rating when targeted, but of our starting corners, he led the team with a 97.1 passer rating when targeted on 692 snaps. So his coverage got better. He was already great against the run. Katano Ladapo was next. Then you get to Keyshawn Nixon at 106.5. So when you look at Keyshawn Nixon's 106.5 passer rating when targeted, but yet he had a 66.7 PFF grade, his coverage grade was the weak spot, right? One of the weak spots at 68.7. But I would tend to lean toward this being more real than this because, again, they don't tell us why they graded the tape the way they graded it, right? They don't show us the individual plays, if that makes sense. So next on the list would be Nate Hobbs at 122.0, and then Carrington Valentine, 126.1. As bad as Nate Hobbs was, Carrington Valentine, I did not see that coming. I thought he was going to take another step this year. Your boy Clayton was wrong. Carrington was not the answer this year. So,
look at the amount of touchdowns both him and Nixon both gave up too. 7 a pop each. I mean, that's just that can't happen, man.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Crazy. Your starting corner's giving up 7 touchdowns each. And it's one thing to give up 7 touchdowns, Emilio, but if you've got 2 or 3 picks to go with it, it's like, okay, it washes out a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Carrington didn't have 1 interception. I think he had a few drops, if I remember correctly. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole point here, Emilio, is like, I think we would all agree we really need to focus on cornerback and free agency and the draft to see if we can pull something out here.
Right, yeah, because I mean, I remember watching those videos of Hobbs, and it's like, yeah, do we expect him back? Do we expect him back? Man, it just looks so gingerly on the knee and everything, and I wouldn't want to put that all on him. But yeah, you get Keyshawn and Carrington out there, they're giving that kind of stuff up. We just can't have it. And if you're not getting the pass rush there, then Key was jumping a couple of them. We were sitting on some of the outs, and then you get beat deep and all that. I think the biggest thing, if we're looking at, drafting and kind of scouting out the next one, is look at all those heights and weights. Pons, I think, is Goody would kind of steer clear of that. I mean, Keyshawn's our shortest corner at 5'10", and that's because he was a quote unquote $6 million, kick returner, right? So everybody else is 6 foot. I mean, I would just think that you're probably looking for a little bit more size on the outside there. Some of that can be physical. And when we just need them to hold for 3-4 seconds, we get a pass rush going.
Yeah. Chris in the chat says, I still love me some 24. I do too. And here's the thing. You got to take into consideration he's a 7th round pick, right? This is like the whole Rasheed Walker thing. The fact that you're getting a starting caliber player at some time, at some points in his career so far in a 7th round, that's great. But also that's what we're talking about with the youngest roster in the league. You're not going to convince me, not that Chris is trying to. I'm just saying I was a Carrington fan last year. Rookie year, hated him. And I'm a Kentucky guy. Hated him in rookie year, said, man, he played like cheeks. 2nd year, played great. 3rd year, played like cheeks, right? And as I think it was Mike said in the chat, Valentine just lost me this year with the tackling. It was awful. It's so true, right? So true. So when you take all that into consideration, wouldn't it have been worth $4 or $5 million to go get a free agent cornerback at $4 or $5 million? And now Carrington is your backup cornerback, and you feel good about that. You feel good about Carrington being a backup cornerback. But hindsight being 2020, I got it. You went out, you got Nate Hobbs, you got a slot corner that, just like we do in Green Bay, we take a guy at a specific position and try to move him over here. We've seen it throughout the years we would draft cornerbacks and play them at safety. We'd draft a safety and try to play them at nickelback. All these different things you did it with Bullard, right? You drafted him at safety. Played him at nickel. First year sucked. This year really bounced back really nice, right? So I don't know, man. That's what I mean by why not go out in free agency. And it doesn't have to be a Jamil Dean or a Jalen Watson. Maybe it can be an Asante Samuel Jr. at $3 or $4 million. Maybe it could be Rasul Douglas. Mm-hmm. You're not going to convince me that Carrington Valentine was going to play better than Rasul Douglas.
St. Juiced, just saying.
Jacob's all about St. Juice. He didn't make my list, but Jacob loves St. Juice. Roger McCreary's another one. Monteric Brown's a very interesting one. And, of course, Trayvon Diggs, who was on this list. But, again, with Trayvon Diggs, I'm not saying he's going to go back to that all-pro form. But there's no one that's going to convince me that Trayvon Diggs is going to play worse than Keyshawn Nixon and or Carrington Valentine. So go get him for $5 million, right? That's why I'm on board with signing a cornerback. If that makes sense. So, so if you guys are watching this video back later, let us know in the comments, how do you feel about the cornerback talk? Do you agree with Daniel Jeremiah that this draft is loaded with day 2 cornerbacks that are meeting in the 2nd and 3rd round, right there in that sweet spot for the Packers? Is it falling into place perfectly for Green Bay? Who would you like to see them draft? Or maybe there's a free agent you'd like to see them sign. Let us know in the comments. Make sure you hit like, make sure you subscribe, click that bell icon for us.